Hello, welcome to Pathagonia. This is Jay. Today we're going to talk about FH deficient leiomyoma of the uterus and more broadly hereditary leiomyomatosis and renal cell carcinoma syndrome, which is due to an FH deficiency. What is FH deficiency? That is a mutation of the fumarate or the fumarate hydratase enzyme in the Krebs cycle, which I know you all really enjoy. Remember, this Krebs cycle helps with oxidative phosphorylation of the cell so that more ATP can be generated to power the cell. Now, if you have an FH deficiency, you're going to have a buildup of fumarate. Your cells are going to think that it's hypoxic, and so it's going to produce more hypoxia-inducible factor, HIF, and you're going to have buildups of metabolites like 2SC, as well as mentioned fumarate. And that's going to eventually increase your risk for leiomyomas of the uterus, of the skin, and more particularly piloleiomyomas, as opposed to angioleiomyomas, as well as renal cell carcinoma, more particularly the papillary renal cell carcinoma type. And this generally happens in people in the third decade, in their 30s. So if you have a papillary renal cell carcinoma in a patient who's 30, you'll want to think about hereditary leiomyomatosis and renal cell carcinoma syndrome, otherwise known as Reed syndrome, named after the first person who reported this syndrome. But we're not going to talk about the renal cell carcinoma. We're not going to talk about the piloleiomas that you see in Reed syndrome. We're going to talk about, in particular, the leiomyomas of the uterus due to FH deficiency. So here we see 3 fragments of, they said, uterus. I presume this to be myometrium. I don't see any endometrium, and perhaps here is serosa. So as we zoom in on high power, I see a very cellular myometrium, and I'm thinking maybe this is kind of like a nodular vesicle, and maybe this is regular myometrium. There's some interspersed vessels. And so as we zoom in closer, there are large cells with this kind of cherry red nucleoli, kind of CMV-like inclusion. So when you have a leiomyoma, you want to look at the cellular details to check for the nucleoli, which is to check for cherry red nucleoli, as well as that kind of CMV-like inclusion, because that's one of the cytologic features of FH deficient leiomyomas of the uterus. And then once your suspicion is increased for this, you can order an FH IHC. And as you can see in the cells, in the neoplastic cells, and you can even see the nucleoli here, even though it's not stained with H&E, they are negative for FH. There is some positivity, but that's with the non-neoplastic kind of endothelial cells here that make up the vessels. And then what's considered more sensitive and specific is 2SC, which is an abnormal metabolite specifically built up for those with FH deficiency. And it will be positive in those with FH deficiency. As we can see here, there is nuclear and cytoplasmic positivity. And so this is a case of FH deficient leiomyomas. you want to look for cherry red nucleoli and CMV-like inclusions in the leiomyomas. They tend to also get pilolyomas, leiomyomas, and also renal cell carcinoma in their 30s, generally the papillary renal cell carcinoma subtype. So thank you for watching. Huge shout out to University of Michigan's pathology department for their online slide library, which I got this case from. Have a good one.